Anyway, I first I started composing when I was 9,
Mm-hmm.
so that's now I'm 28, so that's what, 11 years? No, more.
Quite
21 years,
quite some time. A little bit of time.
20, 19 years, if
Yeah.
my math is correct.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I really got into music then in my third year of high school when I also applied to this to secondary music school. So I did two schools at once, and then later on I applied to music composition at the Music Academy in Ljubljana in Slovenia, where I also teach now as a professor.
Mm.
So I was extremely lucky that my mentor Jani Golob, he did quite a few film scores, Slovenian, mostly for Slovenian films. So I got kind of this mentorship film scoring with him as well. So he didn't only teach me like classical music composition, but also like the basics of film scoring. And I was extremely lucky to have met another Slovenian composer, Aldo Kumar. He's about 60 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually collaborated on a film while I was still in college. So that was my first feature film. It was about the Slovenian independence war, and the film. It was not really good, but it was like a great experience because, Aldo was kind of my mentor on the film, and he
Mm-hmm.
gave me quite a few good tips, and it was great that I got a first feature film to score when I was 19 years old, 20 years old.
Absolutely, and I remember when I scored my first film. I was like 15 years old, and it was this Holocaust film called Once Upon a Family, directed by this filmmaker in New York City. And I was like, really young, 15 years old, and getting brought onto a project like that was a little bit intimidating. What was it like for you when you first were brought onto that project? What were the sort of what was your mental process in sort of breaking down the steps in which you were going to sort of do this, since it is such a multi-step process, and it's a process where you sort of have to it's sort of hard because you have to look all the way at the end product and just sort of take it step by step by step to get there. So what was it like for you to do that project? What was that first project like?
Well, maybe I should go a step back. Is that um, you know the most important part of being a composer, whether you're a media composer, film composer, classical music composer, is that you have this really strong mindset and passion towards what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So as soon as I started my studies at the Music Academy in Ljubljana, uh, I set myself really strong goals. So my first goal was for people to, musicians to perform my music. And my second goal was then when, I started approaching friends. Can I write you a piece? Can I write you a piece? Can I write you a piece?
Mm-hmm.
And then I started writing music for my friends, and they performed my music. And then more people started saying, oh, you write good music. Would you like to write me a piece? So that's
Yeah.
how I kind of got, kind of an opus going of music, and people kind of started knowing my name around my community.
Yeah.
So when I approached Aldo, actually he had a performance with a Slovenian Philharmonic Orchestra, and I went to the performance. I knew he would be there, and I knew that he was also a film composer. So I said, "Oh, that's a great chance that I could meet the guy." And so my second goal was also, I want to write music for films. So
Yeah.
the fastest way in is with from another guy that already, I mean, an established composer that already writes music for film.
What
So
was
after
it?
the concert, I
Yeah. What was it that automatically attracted you to the art of film scoring, like just film scoring in general? Like what was the thing that sort of made you go, this is what I want to do?
I think it was probably the score of Gladiator.
Yeah. It's just
I
like
I, I,
yeah.
I mean, I always enjoyed films,
Yeah.
but when I heard Gladiator, I mean, that was kind of, I said, I want to do that.
Yeah.
I want to write music for film. I loved how Hans portrayed different emotions and different ethnic groups, and
Mm-hmm.
just all these sorts of, yeah, just emotions and backgrounds and atmospheres in one film score.
Yeah. And you did
And
your
I just said,
college thesis on that score, didn't you? You did your college thesis on
yes,
Gladiator?
yes,
Yeah.
I did Berkeley. Then I did my college thesis on Gladiator, just
Yeah.
little homage of
Yeah.
one of my film scores.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but just to get back on my point, maybe I'm swaying a bit, but like this mindset of how like the first thing is you have to get a film to actually score.
Mm-hmm.
And the best people all like they ask me how do you get projects, is you have to create a network. And that doesn't mean that you have to go to LA and create a network. Create a network where you're at home, because that's the people you want to collaborate with. You want to collaborate with people that live in your area. So it doesn't mean that you have to move to LA. No, you don't have to be, like one of the 5,000 or composers that go to LA every year wanting to get a job. If you live in a country with at least some films, try connecting with those people, that in that industry.
Yeah, and I think that whole philosophy having to do with moving to LA and sort of the stories that people have of moving to LA, opportunities open up. I think that all has to go back to the book Outliers, which one of the main things that I took away from Outliers that I think is probably one of the most crucial things to acknowledge is the fact that as composers, nowadays with social media, it's much easier to build a network simply, just out of your house and out of your home studio, but being able to place yourself inside of an environment for which opportunity is constantly available, and having the ability to meet with directors in just 30 minutes and having the availability to see all of the biggest studios all nearby, and communicating with directors and other composers, collaborations. I think that's partially one of the main reasons that people choose to go to LA. It's to have that accessibility to be able to explore the opportunity of collaborations. And Malcolm Gladwell that book is absolutely crucial, I think, when it comes to film composition. But yeah, as you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree, but one has to ask themselves, what are their main goals? If your goal is just, I want to write music for a film, that doesn't mean you have to automatically go to LA.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm guessing that a lot of people that are interesting are still trying to get, their first projects. Don't search for projects outside your little area. I mean, where you live, that's where you're gonna have the easiest way to collaborate with people, the easiest way to network with people. And then when you have certain projects, that you've already done, then you can, think of, what's my next step.
Sure thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where did it go from there? You did your first film, and you met this guy that you were, trying to meet, and you got started in that field. What was the next step for you?
The next step was actually the same film. I mean, this director that did this film about the Syrian independence war actually did then another, like, a kids movie about a little ghost. Ghost family
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of trapped in the 16th century. So then he said, well, why don't you do the music for my film? So that was like my first independent project.
Gotcha.
And I was really lucky for that project because it kind of paid 1/3 of my tuition to Berkeley.
Mm-hmm.
And if I wouldn't have got that project, I wouldn't have been able to even go to Berkeley because I wouldn't be able to pay it.
Yeah.
Maybe to your first question, you asked me how I approached my first score.
Yeah.
I was kind of just thrown into the water.
Mm-hmm.
Aldo, the composer, he just said, okay, you do the beginning credits, and you do this cue and this cue and this cue and this cue.
Yeah.
And then I kind of did all that music, and I showed up to his studio and said, oh, this is what I did. And he said, oh, I like it.
It's sort of like, I love that analogy that Alexandre Desplat had. Composers are sort of like parachuters who are just like sort of being dropped into this war, and the war is between directors and producers, and it's just this craziness, and composers just sort of come in at that on the last stage. Some of the times, there's some composer-director relationships which they like to bring the composer on earlier to sort of be able to evaluate the project a little bit longer beforehand. But having to do it, composers are just sort of like parachuted into this battle, and it's such an intense battle going on. And as composers, we have so much opportunity to fail. But it's so important because this director has been working on this project for so long, and he has this vision. And as composers, we want to support that vision, and we want to do all that we can to try to add that flair and add that thing that perhaps the visuals could not portray, or the audio, no matter what, couldn't portray. Music is such a thing that really just touches us from the inside, and it's something that not a lot of things can really portray. And I think that music has that definite power. But yeah.
Most definitely. maybe just because you said Alexander Desplat, I was at his masterclass in Vienna in early autumn of
Yeah.
2016.
Yeah.
And we could go up on the stage and show him a few pieces, and then he would like comment on our work.
Yeah,
But then
it
he
seems we're
kind
getting some pretty bad connection from over there. Just a bit of a mic issue there. Do you have any other
oh,
mic
sorry.
that you can? Do you have any other mic that you could switch over to, or
Is
just
it
like?
is it really bad?
Yeah, it's just sort of like robotic.
Oh yeah, well I can hook up another mic, but it will take some time. If it's not too bad, maybe we should just stick with this one.
Do you have like a? I don't know. I think it's just like connection. It's not necessarily the microphone, but more of just the connection between us.
Oh well, if it's then we can't really do anything.
I'm not really sure. But yeah.
But I hope people can hear me. But what Alexander Desplat said, he asked us, how much do you know? How much do you know about film?
Yeah.
Because we were all talking about music, and he said the way I connect with directors is because I'm like a film maniac. I watched thousands and thousands of films when I was a kid, and I know all the directors. I mean, I know their way of storytelling, and when someone a director approaches me, and I already know what's his way of storytelling, so we can immediately connect.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, as a film composer, you also have to know about film in general, how the scenes are cut, what does the pace of the cutting of the scenes, how does this affect the story? And
Yeah.
to your second point, you said that we have this almost magical power of
Sure.
transforming a scene. I see a problem with I give private lessons in like film scoring and whatnot, and when I give test scenes to my students to score, I see this major problem that if someone in the film is running across a field, and they start writing running music, how he would run, they actually portray that the exact thing we already see. And I say, what is the character feeling when he's running? You have to portray with the music something that we don't immediately see on the screen, because then the music really has a point. If we just score exactly what's on the screen, then it's you're not really telling anything else about the story or the character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think that music has the we really have the opportunity as composers to describe locations, describe characters, describe aspirations, to describe really an endless amount of things having to do with the film. And the use of thematic material and the use of just different aspects to really describe certain aspects of the film give us endless opportunities to sort of paint this canvas that otherwise couldn't really be painted with anything else, really. It's definitely one of the most important aspects, I think, of any project, is to really take any steps necessary to be able to tell a story. And I think that no matter what we are, whether we're script editors, whether we're composers, whether we're the director, we're all here to tell a story, no matter what it really is. And I think that that's really the power of film music. It's just one of those parts in telling the story, but it has a extraordinary. There's definitely a lot of potential to be able to really add on something that otherwise couldn't be done.
Definitely. Yeah. Maybe a point that we should also make here is that, of course, as a composer in film, you're trying to, tell a story, but that story has to be in sync with the story of the director.
Mm-hmm.
So our mentor at Berkeley, Lucio Godoy, had a really nice analogy on this subject. He said, if you hire someone to paint your house, and you say to him, paint my house yellow, and you come back home and your house is painted green, you're gonna fire the guy.
Yeah.
So sometimes we score a cue and the director hates it, and he says, well, you completely missed the point. I want love music here for the couple. I don't want sad music or anything else.
Sure.
You can in this case, you can give the director options. So you make two cues. You make one cue that you think that fits better, portrays one emotion, and then you make one cue
that he thinks,
that does exactly what the director asks, and then he can choose, and then he can also see how the scene works,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the two different aspects of the music.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so after you did this project, where are you sort of at now? Like, where has your music sort of evolved, and your involvement in the film scoring industry? Where has that sort of evolved, and where are you currently?
Well, I mean, the thing is, I live in Slovenia, and I think I plan to live here. And the film industry in Slovenia is pretty scarce. And most of the directors that actually do films are pretty old, and they tend to stick to the same old people they have worked with for ages, you know.
Yeah.
So I scored 3 feature films. 2 of them, one of them was the collaboration, one of them was before Berkeley, and one of them was last year. And I actually got to score it. You know, I only had 1 week to score it because they fired the composer before. But I basically, you know, what I do now in Slovenia is I do a lot of music for commercials.
Awesome.
That's probably my main income. But it's, you know, it's the same process than in film scoring, just that the material is a lot shorter. You get, you know, 1 minute or max 2 minute long commercials. But you usually have to do them overnight or max 2-3 days.
Absolutely. And also,
but that communication with the director is still, you know, it's so important. But in advertisements, you don't only have the director, you have the, you know, the director is almost like the final link in the chain. Because you have to satisfy the commercial agency that was hired by the client. So let's say the client is Pepsi, they hire like an agency to make like the whole, you know, ad for them. And then the agency hires the production team, and the production team hires the composer. So you have to go, you know, director, agency, and then the hired client has to like it as well.
Well, that's exactly how it was for the first project that I did, that Holocaust film. It was actually this company called Project Witness, which is this company that spans throughout the whole world, that's supported by different investors and different organizations, and pretty much what they do is their whole sort of purpose is to preserve history, and notably the history of the Holocaust and World War II. So these people hired a production company in New York City called Big Productions, and Big Productions is led by this guy G. Orman, and then G. Orman brought me on. So I not only had to satisfy this director G. Orman, but now I have to satisfy the company Project Witness, and so it's this multi-step process. But it adds this whole other layer, because not only do you have to satisfy this one person like you would in a normal sort of independent film scoring world, to where, you know, somebody will send you a project, you'll score it, you'll send it back, that's how it is, they'll release it, and it's this simple sort of thing because you only have sort of one barrier, or one wall to break through, right? But, you know, if you have a much more multi-leveled process, it gets a little bit more complex.
Yeah, I mean, it can be very nerve-wracking at times because, you know, I've gotten fired from quite a few commercials because the director said, you know, I want this kind of music, you know, let's say piano romantic music, and I did piano romantic music.
And damn you, Anze, you're a rebel.
but you know, the director wanted piano music, but the agency from the beginning said they wanted, you know, they didn't want romantic music, they wanted, you know, hipster music, whatever, you know.
Sure, yeah.
Some indie pop. But the director didn't tell me that information. So in the end, of course, you know, the agency said, well, we didn't want this. But it was, you know, a miscommunication because the director didn't communicate with me correctly.
Yeah.
And I mean, maybe a lot of people that are listening now are saying, well, we're not really talking about film music here, and we want to know how to write music. I mean, part of writing music is really kind of like 1/4 of the whole job.
Absolutely, I agree.
Like communication, it's the most important part. For example, for another like Christmas commercial, I wrote, you know, it was like kind of a progression in major, you know, you have the major triad, and then it goes to the minor subdominant. It's like really, and maybe you can play them for the people if you have your MIDI keyboard.
Like a major. Like a what?
Major triad, and it goes into the minor subdominant. So it.
Okay, minor subdominant. Okay, so like that'd be like the.
So it's D, G, and then C, F, A flat.
E to G.
CG,
Oh, CG.
C,
Yeah, the
D, E,
dominant.
G, C, F, A flat.
Ah, C, F, A flat. Wow.
Never mind. Well, anyway, I wanted to resolve that minor chord at the end to portray this happy feeling. It was like it was for a bakery, and
Yeah.
like the end loaf that was baked was like kind of the baby Jesus born. It was really, really cheesy. So anyway, I got this email back from not the director but the agency. The director loved it, but the agency had this main man that played piano for 3 years and knew like just the basics of music theory. And the email said, "I want you to remove all the major chords.
Yeah.
I don't want it." But what does that mean? Remove all major chords? You can't remove all major. All minor chords.
So they literally use
He
music
said
terminology.
minor chords are sad.
They
He
use
said minor
music.
chords are sad.
These guys use music terminology to communicate with you.
Yeah, but
Oh no.
he said, I don't like minor chords. Minor chords are sad. This has to be a happy advert. It's Christmas time.
Oh,
Remove all minor chords. And I'm like, what minor chords? I have tons of minor chords. Even in the C major scale, if you go to the 6th position, you're gonna have a minor chord,
Yeah, like this.
So,
yeah.
So it's just communication. Or you get an email and it says, now I have like almost an Excel table made of like common words I get. Like if the client says that it sounds too much like church music, then I have to remove the choirs.
Sure. Yeah.
If they say that they want it to be more sparkly, then I have to add wind chimes. But it's like just this terminology, that you get a sense of what the director wants, because they usually communicate without a musical terminology, as you said,
Yeah, absolutely.
But they said, well, we want brilliant music that's portraying water. You have to decipher that in a way. What does that mean?
Yeah.
A lot of times I stare at those emails like, what's water music? Like, how can I?
Sure. Yeah.
Or just one more thing that I remember funny. Like a director said, remove the flutes. I don't like flutes. There were no flutes, so what does he mean? The clarinets and the horns?
Yeah, that's crazy.
There are no flutes.
That's funny. Okay, well, just a little introduction from me. Some of you guys might know me, but pretty much I started music at the age of 6. I played guitar, drums, and piano. Those are sort of what I studied. I played in multiple different bands, including one called the Rise of Gravity Experience. Recorded my first record at age 9. Recorded my second record at 14. Got involved in film music later that year in 2014. And started studying classically as well as contemporarily with Synthesis World and everything like that. And then in 2015, I scored my first feature, and then I kept doing that throughout 2015, scored multiple independent projects. And I scored Justice League: The Shattered Paragon, this big sci-fi superhero independent film, which was like an hour of music earlier last year, 2016. And there's some cool stuff planned for this year. I run this YouTube channel where I pretty much do composition tutorials, live stream events, everything like that. And yeah, and I just absolutely love the world of film scoring and the relationship that music has with film. And I think that it's a absolutely mandatory part of the filmmaking process to get right. And I definitely think that it's a complex process. It's a multi-layered process. There's a lot of people involved in the process. Even though you might not think, there is a lot of people involved. As seen by the conversation I was telling you, Anze, that happened. Anze, right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That happened yesterday between me and somebody who works in LA for a recent film that just came out. But anyway, so I'm scheduled to do like this internship thing with Hans Zimmer later this year, and I'm also doing the NYU film scoring program, and I'm thinking about going to the Royal College of Music next year, even though I'm just a sophomore in high school, so it's my second year. I'm thinking about just going to college and, spending my time wisely instead of studying apothegms and, stuff like that. But, yeah,
I would just like to point out, like, when I first started, exploring your music, and I was like, hell, who's this kid, And then the more I started, listening to your streams and getting to know you better, I have the feeling, when I talk to you, you have so much knowledge that I have the feeling that I'm talking to someone, my age or twice my age even.
That's
So
very nice
maybe
of
the
you.
people that are watching, and say, who's this kid? Why should I listen to him? People can learn so much from you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Because you're a workaholic and you have this strive and passion that most people acquire in their 20s. And I mean, something is talent, but what I say is the most important. It's that you find this passion. So let's say if you find this passion that you want to be a film composer when you're 6 years old, let's say, you're gonna focus all your energy from that point. And like in 10 years, when you're gonna be 16, you're gonna have a lot of work and knowledge already.
Absolutely,
But,
yeah.
but
Yeah,
if you acquire this passion when you're 20, I think you need about 10 years to master.
yeah. Absolutely. And throughout my life, I've been blessed to have so many incredible sort of teachers and professors that I personally sort of give all my trust to sort of, and I've, been blessed to have people who have sort of given me a lot of their knowledge and stuff. And so a lot of the people that have impacted me, like Snorre from Norway, his teacher Simen, which I'm actually starting a Baroque composition masterclass fairly soon. The first episode is being filmed on Monday. He's probably one of the most extravagant, amazing Baroque composers of the modern day. He writes these amazing concertos in the Baroque style, and he studied at the Norwegian Conservatory of Music. But people like that, Michael Shelley at University, and so I'm constantly just sort of wanting to take in more information, and not only take in information, but take in a various amount of information. And there's so many talented people out there who are amazing in the specific field and what they're in, whether it's trailer composers, whether it's composers who specialize in the more Hans Zimmer style, perhaps it's the more John Williams style with the very, very flourishing sophisticated orchestration like yourself, which is amazing. And the thing that I love about your style is that you're incredibly versatile. You can listen to your music on SoundCloud, and it's just you'll find music of all different styles. And you write. I think you're probably like I call you the god of like woodwind writing because you write for like woodwinds so incredibly well. And your woodwind writing is just, especially for the flutes. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. You wrote this one piece for like the flutes, the piccolos, alto flute, bass flute. It's amazing. But anyways, I'm definitely excited to jump right into this. So the first thing we're going to start out by talking. The first thing we're going to talk about is pretty much what is film scoring and what's the importance of film scoring. And then we'll start diving into the whole idea of do you need to know music theory and the fundamentals of harmony, orchestration, and counterpoint, sort of like the more classical training of music. Is that totally necessary for a film composer? And why has it evolved in a way to where most people think it's, I guess, not? And what would it do? What would be the good things in just sort of learning those things? Because I know that you sort of had a fairly classical education in terms of music. You could tell just by listening to your music. And a lot of people that I've studied from did, like Snorre, who studied Baroque music, but that definitely translated into the John Williams style with the very amazing orchestration and stuff. But anyway, so what is film scoring? And what is its importance? So as you guys know, film music, I think, usually is always brought in towards the end of the film. There's been this gigantic long process. There's been this director with a vision, and he's gone through a very, very long process to be able to bring people on board, share his ideas, really explore the world of film, and try his best to bring other people on board and have other people believe in this idea that the director has just as much as he does. And so when it comes to a composer, I think that this is a really important thing that Hans Zimmer said in his recent masterclass. He said, there's a language for which the composer, for which the director can speak to the cinematographer, and can speak to the editor, can speak to the script editor, and can speak to all these different people. But when it comes to a director speaking with the composer, there's no specific language, and so pretty much the composer is having to directly translate what this director is saying into musical terms. So, for the most part, other than if it's like Gore Verbinski, who, I remember Hans Zimmer saying that he always talks about music theory. He's like, can we go to a dominant chord here, which would be absolutely hellish. But I know that a lot of different, composers just enjoy taking in the information about the emotions of the film, what's these characters' motivations, everything like that. And I think that film music is extremely important because it allows us, like I was saying earlier, to describe characters, to describe places, events, and the use of thematic material, and really could really go super far to be able to describe in a film what a lot of other things can't. And that's one of the main things that I love about film music. It's just like how many different effects that you can use. Like I was giving this lecture on Tuesday at the Indiana Filmmakers Network, and I was talking about just some different methods that composers can use to sort of manipulate emotions. So one of them was like thematic reminders, or wherever in a film where you have like a character come in, or you have this event that happens, you sort of bring the theme back in. You might have like textural descriptions. So like, for example, the Joker in The Dark Knight, where it's not really a theme, but it's more of just like a textural theme. So like textural descriptions of different characters or events. You might have reverse emotions, where you'll have like something really creepy happening, but then you'll have like really happy music, sort of like The Conjuring and the creepy lullaby and stuff. Or you might have like following movement, for example, like Daniel James when he was scoring UFO Yeah, when like the spaceship is pretty much like when they're taking this guy up off the ground, the music is actually floating and the flutes are doing these really awesome runs, and so it's actually following the movement and the music is going up as this guy is going up. Or there's always the most important one, I think, which is silence. That moment where you need to figure out where is it cool to keep silence, because a lot of directors like to use music to fix mistakes. They also like to use music to support the film and really add a lot of definition to the film. And so when a director makes the decision to not have music at all, it's for a very specific reason. Because it's very easy for a director to say, go write music wall to wall, and I'll see you in a few months, and we'll dub it in, and that's that. But for a director to actually take a second to think about the implications of the music and actually say, okay, no, for this specific area, we're not going to have any music at all. That's a very interesting decision that a director makes, and Martin Scorsese does it all the time, and it works well, like in Shutter Island, or perhaps in his new movie Silence, which makes a little bit of sense when it comes to silence. But those are just some things that I love about film music, and I want you to go ahead and share some of the things that you love about film music and some of the things that, like, what you think film scoring is in general. Off to you, Anze.
Yeah, I'll just make another analogy that I like to give it. Imagine a scene where you have a guy and a woman,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that they're like, let's say they're wife and husband.
Yeah.
But in the film, let's say that the husband is cheating on his wife, but we don't know that yet. We don't know that yet.
Mm-hmm.
So as a composer, you have multiple choices how to score the scene. Let's say you just make a love theme for the couple, and you can use this love theme. Maybe you use the theme of the wife, or you can use the theme of the husband, or you can go a fourth way, and you use the theme of the mistress.
Mm-hmm.
That's not actually on the screen. I mean, maybe the director wants that, and maybe he wants to use the mistress theme for the first time there, and to get a little tip to the audience. Oh, something's not right.
Yeah.
What is this theme? And then 40 minutes into the film, you actually realize it's the mistress's theme. So, I mean, this imaginary film that I just explained, it's a good example of how you can score something that's not on the screen. And I think it's one of the most important parts as a composer, that you realize these hidden emotions and hidden storylines that you can portray. Of course, you have to be in sync with the director, but I mean, I get so many of my students, they write exactly what's on the screen, and I try to forward them in the direction. Don't write what's on the screen. Write for what's not on the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, sort of like if you're writing like sort of music to describe a character's aspirations or something, like something that they're trying to achieve, and you write music for that as they're continuing to on that path to achieve it. Yeah. Yeah.
Our professor at Berkeley, he always said, if I remember correctly, that's like putting a hat on a hat. If you have a hat on your head, you don't need another hat.
Yeah, true that.
Putting a hat on a hat. So if you score something that's so obvious on the screen, and then you score it some more. I mean, you put music that's exactly it's what exactly it's on the screen. It's
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it works, but often it doesn't.
Yeah. So how important do you think knowing music theory and knowing the fundamentals of harmony, orchestration, and counterpoint are? Because I know both you and I, we sort of studied in that way, and we're similar in our approach to composition in that way. But a lot of people, which I totally respect, just sort of do it everything by ear. And I know that as composers, it's very important sometimes to sort of collide our educational view and our view of what's logical and what works with our, with our just sort of like common sense ear, like what really sounds great. But in your perspective, what's the importance of these things?
I would say that it's important and it's not important. If I go back to when I started, when I started composing, I had no clue what I was doing. I had no music theory.
Yeah.
I could hardly play piano, so I was just really writing what sounded good to me.
Yeah.
And when I listen to my really really old compositions, I have some really cool ideas that I would never have thought of now. And I would have never thought of them now because my brain is, filled with information. And whenever I compose something, my brain goes, well, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that,
Yeah.
because of all the classical music rules that I have. So knowledge, in a way, I think of it in this way. Maybe just for example, when I started studying harmony, and you start studying harmony, and we had this really, really strict professor of harmony, and he said, perfect fifths shouldn't be used. Those were his words.
Oh, I had
but
that
he didn't
too.
say, he didn't say perfect fifths. A parallel fifth shouldn't be used if you're composing in the Baroque and classical style.
You just said not at all.
That's just not at all. And me, as a 14-year-old kid, I said, well, I shouldn't use parallel fifths. I've been composing wrong, for 5 years now.
Yeah.
So for like a year, I really, didn't write anything with any parallel fifths.
Well, I was told when I was studying Baroque music, that every single time, you use a parallel fifth, Bach kills a cat. So, I never wanted to use parallel fifth.
But that's at one point I said, okay, I have this knowledge, I'm acquiring knowledge, so I'm going to use it like a treasure chest,
Yeah.
If you have a treasure chest filled with, abundance of treasures, you can choose which treasure you're gonna, pick at a certain moment.
Sure.
But when I compose, I like to compose in a state where I imagine you have like this little wall between your conscious and your subconscious, and I like to compose through my subconscious mind. That means that I don't think about what I'm composing. When I compose, I want it to be fluent. I just want things to come into my mind and I want to write them down. And as soon as I start thinking, oh, is this the right chord? What chord should I put here now? But the flutes can't play this, and your brain, starts questioning yourself. At that moment, I stop composing and I take a pause.
Well, this has something very,
because my knowledge is beginning to interfere with me. But the more knowledge you have, the more potential your subconscious has to drain ideas from this knowledge. But you shouldn't take knowledge as I was learned to orchestrate like this, and then you would orchestrate only in this way.
Yeah.
But as soon as you have knowledge and you say, okay, the master is orchestrated in this way, I know this. Let's try this.
Yeah.
I know how Tchaikovsky orchestrated, but I want to try turning it around.
And
it's easier.
It all goes back to a couple of things that I remember hearing. I remember Christoph Beck, the guy who composed the score for like Frozen. He said that in those moments where we're like heavily relying on inspiration to write music, but we don't really have inspiration, and the deadline's coming up and we just have to write music. We have to get it on the page, and we sort of have to get it to the scoring stage, and it's this very demanding thing. There's certain times where you just sort of have to have that toolbox of different orchestrational, harmonic techniques to be able to just sort of be like, okay, this works, this is logical, this will make perfect sense with what's happening on screen. Let's just go ahead and put it down, and that's that. A lot of the times, I'll see composers, all the time, a lot of times on Facebook posting like, oh, I have no inspiration, I can't write music at all, and I sort of feel bad for them because like if you just just get a theory book, and you can just sort of, you can really, like, once you start reading a theory book, it's sort of like when you get a new sample library. You just start getting inspired by different methods of composition. And when I was reading Principles of Orchestration, I'd see all these really in-depth looks into doubling and everything like that, and the way for which voices move in a composition, and I just automatically felt as though I needed to write. And that's a very important thing. And also, something having to do with this, and the world of theory and the world of orchestration and harmony, everything like we're talking about here, it's such a large, vast world. And as it does sort of give us confidence when we're composing, but at the same time, a lot of the times it puts a lot of pressure on us as well, because there's so many rules, and there's so many things that we're taught when we have a classical education, like sort of us who studied in the classical manner. But when it comes to
Maybe I'll just sorry to interfere for a while.
yeah,
Actually,
sure, yeah, no problem.
there are rules, but I hate calling them rules.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it's
They're just
I mean,
logical.
you're not,
Yeah.
if you make a perfect a parallel fifth, no one's gonna die.
Yeah.
But if like a doctor, doesn't follow one of like a procedure on an operation, the patient might die. So we're very free as composers. I mean, you do whatever you like. I mean, if it sounds good to you, and maybe if it sounds crap to 99% of the people, but if it sounds good to you, stick to it. That's gonna be your style.
Yeah. But one thing. Sorry.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, I always like to give at least my students freedom. Even if I don't agree with what they've written, I said, okay, if it sounds good to you, I mean, it doesn't sound good to me because of this, and this. I
Okay.
tell them why. But if they still want to stick to it, you're not gonna. Nobody's gonna die because of it.
Yeah, but what about when people bash music theory as an excuse to not study music theory? Like I hear people all the time saying it's not important, it sucks, and that's like their excuse to not study it. Like I know a lot of people from a psychological standpoint, a lot of the times in order to, it allows a lot of, it takes a lot of the pressure off if you sort of bash something that you don't want to do or you haven't done. And so when people say like music theory is a cheat sheet, it sort of is, but at the same time, it's sort of things that have worked throughout hundreds and hundreds of years in the way for which music has evolved in a logical manner, right? But.
Well, I would say, I mean, bashing anything is wrong if you don't know anything about it. So you can't say music theory is bad. It's just a cheat sheet. I don't want to learn it. But if your mindset is in a way, I know a lot of composers that have no musical, no like classical background, but they create amazing music,
Yeah.
And they ask me, should I learn this, and this, and I want to, orchestrate like John Williams. Okay, if you want to orchestrate like John Williams, then probably you have a long way ahead of you of learning orchestration, instrumentation, harmony, etc. But, if you're John Doe and you want to orchestrate like John Doe, or, just compose music as whoever you are, then maybe you don't need music theory. Then just, create your own music theory. But don't expect, that you'll be able to do this. If you want to be in the media music industry, if you want to create music for films and advertisements, you have to be very versatile. And in order to be versatile, you have to study many, many styles and many compositional styles. So in that aspect, yes, you will have to eventually at least find the path of learning these.
And I still remember, I've always been somebody who admires and is inspired by people who are better than me. And so a lot of my composition teachers, I had them as my composition teachers because I came to the realization, and I was humble enough to acknowledge the fact that these guys were better than me. These guys had been studying way longer than I had, and they've had experiences that I haven't had. So that's why I bring them on as my teachers. And I think that, throughout that whole process, it's constantly this, you're constantly being sort of inspired by these endless amounts of different ideas and stuff. But I think that when you have different composition teachers, it's so important to realize that each one of these different teachers are just presenting you with their specific amount of experiences. And when you have multiple different, the reason why I've had multiple different teachers is because I realized that each one of these teachers have their different approaches to composition, and each of them have had their own different experiences, and each of them have, throughout their lives, sort of approach music in a different way. And I think that it would just be sort of a waste of time if you had, like, for example, like general music teachers, like you'd have like in public schooling, right? Their job is to do what a lot of the jobs are in education, right? You're just teaching one course and that's that. But when you're actually bringing on like a private instructor, you're bringing on a private instructor to teach you a certain amount of things that have to do with what you're trying to achieve. And when you bring in multiple different teachers who've had their different experiences in different fields, that's I think what eventually creates versatility. And I think that that's like sort of a very important aspect as in a film composer's repertoire, definitely being versatile. But we have a couple questions here, and I just want to sort of read off one of them. We actually have a few of them, quite a lot. Okay, I'll just read off one. I'm interested in one thing. Very often, this is from Michael Frankenberger, by the way, who was also at the Desplat masterclass.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, so very often I start out with a melody and then add harmony, etc. My composition teacher told me that many big composers searched the right chord progression and made this perfect, and then wrote the melody. How are you both doing it?
Can I start with that?
Sure. Yeah, definitely.
Again, I would say there's no right and there's no wrong way. So you can either start with a melody and write a chord progression, or start with a chord progression and write a melody. It doesn't really matter the way. But another thing I would like to point out, there's no perfect chord progression and there's no perfect melody. And I see a lot of composers, they start scoring something or writing a classical music piece, and at bar 20, let's say, they don't feel right about bar 20, and then they make 40 versions of bar 20, and they lose 3 hours of work because they don't like bar 20.
Mm-hmm.
When I compose, if I don't like a certain chord, and I know that it's not the perfect chord, and I know that I'm never going to find the perfect chord, I just say, okay, it's not the perfect chord, but I just I just continue writing.
Uh-huh.
So at the end of the day, I'll produce 2-3 minutes of music. I know that that chord is not perfect, so if it's gonna bother me after another day or two, maybe I'm gonna try to find another option for it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you find yourself in this loop call where you're rescoring and rescoring a certain part endless times, at the end you won't know if your first version or your 50th version is any better, because none of them is gonna be any better than the previous one, because there's no magic chord and there's no perfect melody and there's no perfect harmony.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
That's my point of view, and that way you get music done. and I'm not 100% happy of any music I have ever written. Like, there's always that one bar somewhere that I said, I don't really like it.
Yeah.
I wrote it that way at that second, so that's like a portrayal of that emotional state that that I had at that certain time.
I sort of want to touch on Michael's question a little bit. I know that if you were to, Daniel James, for example, who studied at a vocal school in London, or somebody like Harry Gregson Williams or Rupert Gregson Williams, who studied at very sophisticated choir schools or whatever. For Harry and Rupert, very, very strict choir schools, which are definitely a good intro to the world of composition because of the very strict nature of them. But a lot of times what they'd had to do is they'd had to take just a sort of a melodic line and then expand and create the harmony for that melodic line. It's a thing that I always did in Baroque as well, sort of like harmonization methods, where you will sort of have this melodic line and it'll just sort of harmonize it. A lot of composers that we now look up to, like Beethoven and Mozart, a lot of the times they're just sort of scoring it all at once, and if you were to ask them that question, they just would sort of say it's this very obscure process, because they're just sort of doing it. It's muscle memory to them how they harmonize and how they write their melodies, and it's just sort of all part of one game. But I think that in the modern world, with like trailer music and like epic music. A lot of the times, what a lot of people will do is they'll just sort of start out with the instrumentation that they feel as though is the most important part of the piece. For example, if you're writing some like trailer cue, you might start out with these like insanely intense percussion, like this insanely intense percussion, and then later you might at the end add in like a huge French horn line with some string octaves to create your melody or your theme. So it all really depends on what the thing is that you're working on, and a lot of people would give you different ideas of what's right when it comes to writing the melodic line first or writing the harmony first. But a lot of the times when people are sketching at the piano, a lot of the times people will come up with harmonic ideas far before they come up with thematic ideas. It all really depends on what the project is and the context of it.
I mean, is if you have a theme, write like 4 different harmonic progressions for that theme.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say your theme is like in your initial harmonic progression, it maybe sounds heroic. Try to find a harmonic progression that would make it romantic, and try to find your harmonic progression that would make it sound sad. I mean, that's a great tool for film scoring when you write a theme. So you realize what potentials your theme has. But I would also point out this: when you compose, and when you study. Don't do this. Don't study while you compose. That's what I mean. Don't try to find your perfect chord progression while you're actually composing the music. When you compose, you have to switch off your conscious mind and just compose in your subconscious state. And that's going to be, the best portrayal of that emotional state that you have at that time.
Agreed. Yeah.
That's awesome. My point of view. My point of
It's a very good point. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing. Okay. So what is a film composer's job? So what is the job of a film composer when he's brought into a project? I'll start out with this because I have a couple things to say about this. But one of the things that I said on Tuesday at this little masterclass thing, not a masterclass because I'm far from a master, but sort of like this lecture that I did for a couple hours for the Indiana Filmmakers Network, I talked about the different roles that a filmmaker has. And I think that one of the most important roles that a film composer has is to serve the story and to serve the film. And this is to better enhance and better explain what's going on in the film using the tool of music. But I also think that there's a couple additional bonuses. One of the bonuses is being innovative, but at the same time satisfying the director. So a lot of composers that we remember, like Hans Zimmer and like James Newton Howard and James Horner, Alexandre Desplat. These are people that took the director's advice on the direction to go in the film, but then sort of exited the boundaries of normality and sort of innovated and continued to create. Doing stuff that wasn't normal, like Desplat's gigantic, unbelievable orchestrational approach to Godzilla, or Hans Zimmer's radical use of synthesizers in The Dark Knight and Inception, which is insanely awesome. Or you might have creating something that could potentially live on its own, like Hans Zimmer, John Williams, James Horner. I'm probably not going to want to sit through a whole entire concert of some obscure film that came out in some summer blockbuster film, or something like that. But for scores like, from composers like Hans Zimmer and John Williams and James Horner, who are not only focused on creating a score that works with the film, but also creating a memorable score and a score that could live outside of the film, that can sort of live on its own and have its own heart and live on throughout.
That's exactly what Alexandre Desplat said at his masterclass.
Wait,
as well.
Your microphone is 20 times better, so it might just be that you were too close and the audio is too heavy.
I don't know.
So you
maybe
might
I just had to get empty.
yeah. Wherever you were, just talking there, I think it's definitely a much better place. Yeah.
Alexandre Desplat said the exact same thing you said, and that you should write, like, your film music should work in concert as well.
Yeah.
At least your main themes. Like, no one wants to listen to film music that doesn't work in a concert form. I mean, that was his mindset.
Mm-hmm.
It's not gonna be like it's not gonna be in this concert form all the time. Of course, you're gonna have scenes that need music that wouldn't work in concert, but like your main themes and main credit, end credit. These should be musical compositions that would work without a film as well, and would still, when someone would listen to these themes, it would still, you know, bring forth the emotions of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say if you listen to, is it Now We're Free from Gladiator?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I get teary eyes whenever I listen to it because
Yeah.
it brings me back to the film, to that ending sad
Yeah.
dying scene.
Maximus.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the music of that scene is so well connected to the emotional context of that scene that even if you listen to it without the film, you still feel the same emotions.
Yeah, it's the same with the theme from E.T. If you hear the da 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 da, you're automatically on this bicycle going through the sky. Or if you're listening to dun 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 dun, you're automatically like in this fierce battle with Darth Vader. And composers have this unbelievable skill, the really really good ones do, to connect the music so extremely well with the visuals that it literally becomes a part of the film. To where in some projects, even the directors sometimes might be like, I just want the music to support what's there and not even live on its own at all. For example, Martin Scorsese usually does it like that. If he doesn't have a score at all, he usually has a score that is completely unlistenable. Like, for example, in Silence, there's this really weird score, and they released it, which is really weird, but it's just like sub bass. The whole score is like weird sub bass sounds, and it's so odd because you never hear it in the movie theater. It's just like that weird. But that's probably the approach that the director wanted the composer to do. To where the really good directors like Steven Spielberg, they want to use music to add a whole nother definition to the film. I mean, imagine Schindler's List without that theme. I mean, it's literally impossible to imagine that film without, think about it without being black and white, and think about it without having John Williams' score. It's virtually impossible because those are two decisions that were made that made all the impact in the world, and that, completely altered the way that the film is perceived. So that's just, a really important part of film composition, I think.
Agreed.
Cool. Okay, so our next topic here, software. So sample libraries, this having to do with orchestral samples, synthesis, and the choice of DAW, digital audio workstations. It's different for everyone. I know that, Ramin Djawadi, the Game of Thrones composer, and the dude who just wrote the score for Great Wall, who's someone I love a lot, he still uses Logic 9. And I know that it's different throughout the whole entire field. A lot of people are using Cubase. Harry Gregson Williams, Hans Zimmer now are using Cubase. I use a Logic Pro X. What is your DAW of choice?
Mine is Cubase. Mine.
You're one of those Cubase guys. Okay.
Well, at Berkeley, we had to use Logic and Pro Tools in Ableton. So
Gotcha.
basically, any DAW you throw at me, I'll be able to use it. And that's if you're searching, if your plan is to go to LA and to upper your chances in getting an internship at a remote control, or any an internship or assistantship with a composer, it's a really great tool to know all the DAWs on the market.
Yeah.
Because no one is going to hire you if you're going to be a purely Cubase user and the composer you want to work with is going to be on Logic. He's never going to hire you. Mm-hmm. You have to know Logic in order to work for him.
Well, that's exactly what happened when I went to Harry Gregson Williams' studio. I still remember. It's this crazy event that happened, but I still remember when he was like, "So what DAW do you use?" I was like, Logic. He's like, "Oh no! You're gonna have to learn Cubase if you're gonna work at RCP, or if you're gonna be my assistant, anything like that. You're gonna have to learn Cubase." I was like, "Damn it!" And he's like, "Oh yeah, you'll probably have to learn Pro Tools too." It's like, ugh. So I went home and I bought Cubase, and I just could not figure out anything at all. Zero zilp. It's like a completely other alien language. I mean, this is like Arrival. aliens land on the planet and they're speaking this weird language, and you're like, WTF? That's like a new DAW for me, at least. It's a very large world in terms of the different DAWs that there are. I know there's Cubase, Logic, Pro Tools, which is more used as like a sort of mixing platform and live orchestra recording platform. But I mean, the list just goes on. And I remember putting up these polls on Facebook asking people what they used, and there were some that just some that I've never heard of before. But I think it all comes down to what allows us to write music the quickest, the most efficient, yeah. But if you're obviously interning, yeah.
Like Attila Atz from Hungary, he's a very well-known trailer music composer for really slow motion and like other companies. Like his trailer music is all over the place.
Yeah.
And he uses SoundForge, I think.
SoundForge?
Yeah, it's like it looks like Excel when you open it up. Wow. But his production is top notch. He's one of the best. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what DAW you use if you work for yourself. Just choose one and learn it, and you're like, most DAWs are pretty equivalent nowadays.
Yeah.
Like the more well-known ones. But if you plan to work, for another composer or collaborate with another composer, then definitely, learn as many as you can.
Yeah, take it into consideration.
Just up your chances of, getting jobs.
Yeah. So what samples do you use?
I have tons.
Yeah.
And I'm never happy with what I have.
Yeah.
I've been acquiring samples for probably around 10 years now. So
10 years, wow.
I don't even know how much I've spent. But the first samples I bought was the East-West Symphonic Orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
It was like 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Or like it was called Complete Composers Collection. You could buy 7 libraries. And that was like $900 at the time.
That was hilariously my first library as well. I got the Composers Collection.
Most people's first library, I at least.
And after a year or so, I just ditched it.
Now I have, all Cinesample stuff and Spitfire, and I have tons of libraries, and I'm never happy with what I have. So I suggest that, buy an orchestral sample library that just has everything like East-West or Spitfire or whatever your budget allows you, and then learn to bring the most out of that sample library.
Yeah.
Because what I've learned is I get a new sample library like every 14 days or a month or something. I just can't help myself.
Yeah. And
then I just forget about, the ones I already have.
Mm-hmm.
And you listen to some mock-ups that are done just with Cinesamples, and you say, oh, that's amazing, and then you try to recreate the mock-up, and it sounds like shit when you do it.
Yeah.
And it's not you, but me. And just because, I didn't take enough time to learn how to, write with these samples, because every sample library is like, it's a different instrument,
Yeah. And ever since I started doing this whole YouTube thing, I've gotten endless people messaging me, being like, what sample library should I buy first? And they give me like 2 different options. They're like, I don't have any samples. Should I buy Cinematic Studio Strings, or should I buy like Albion 1? And I'm like, duh, Albion 1, because that that allows you at least to be able to start writing music, right? If you just have like one string library and you don't have any other instruments at all, even like Complete 10 Ultimate, that'd definitely be an awesome option for your first library. It doesn't have the best samples, but it does have everything that you need to write music.
I would definitely go for Complete.
Yeah.
Because then you can practically score anything.
Yeah.
You get everything.
Yeah.
And then I would add probably Metropolis, Arc 1, and Albion 1, because the sample libraries really complement each other. And when you have Complete 11, Albion, and Metropolis, you can basically score anything you want.
Yeah, so somebody asked... Yeah. Sorry?
Go ahead.
Somebody asked a question. Oh, gotcha. Okay, so they say best string, winds, brass, and perc libraries. Oh, that's a big question. Okay. I'd say for strings, it's definitely going to be a culmination of Cinematic Studio Strings, which have this insanely lush, beautiful sound, and it just sounds so incredibly filmic. And then also, I would end up using soaring strings. It's almost like, imagine Tina Guo cello, like the expressiveness of that cello with a full entire ensemble. So they split it up into the violins, violas, cellos, and basses. You don't have violins too. but you can just duplicate it and pan them right and left, and it sounds somewhat like that. But that allows you to really pronounce your melodies really well. So I use those two as my mains, but I also have all of the Albions. I have Majestica, which has this really insanely large, lush sound, which is different from Metropolis Arc, which has like a very aggressive, intense sound, especially in the lower section, since they use more basses than they did cellos, and in the setup of the orchestra on that one. But sorry. Oh, yeah. Okay, and then also Spitfire Audio are the guys, and I think that I think that their option of recording at Air Studios is definitely an awesome option, because things just start ending up sounding way more cinematic right out of the box when you have them recording at Air Studios and stuff. And I think that I definitely prefer, when it comes to strings, like their Mural libraries, which of course have gone into their symphonic collection that you just did a review on. But I think that I like those because it gives you the opportunity to actually split up the orchestra, so you can have like the violins, violas, and basses, to where if you have like Albion, they pretty much just give it in like string high, string low, string mids, and I definitely don't always prefer writing music and orchestrating like that, because I do like to write in a polyphonic way to where I compose all the separate voices, because it ends up sounding better and more lush. But I definitely like to have the variety of the instruments. But I think that when it comes to percussion, definitely go for 8-Dio. 8-Dio has some insanely awesome cinematic percussion, which is cool. But also Hans Zimmer percussion is great because it was also recorded at Air, and it just sounds like Zimmer. It has the essence of Zimmer. And for orchestral percussion, you can either do percussion redux from Spitfire, or you can do Cineperk. Off to you, Anze.
I agree with everything you said.
Yep.
And I would just like to say, like I said, there's no perfect melody and no perfect chord.
Mm-hmm.
No perfect composition. There's no perfect sample library.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why really set your budget and say, okay, I'm going to spend $1,000.
Yeah.
And then spend those $1,000 in a way that you kind of fill in everything you need. So, if you're going to write orchestral music, then probably go, buy maybe East-West orchestral collection, or go buy Albion 1 and Metropolis or something. But then tell yourself, I'm not going to buy anything else until I get a project. And then when you get a project to score, and you maybe, let's say you're going to get paid another $1,000, you say, okay, I'm going to use 20% of what I earn and invest that into my gear and sample libraries.
Yeah. And it's
I kind of do that. I kind of say, okay, 20% of everything I earn from projects, I'm going to spend on sample libraries.
Yeah. And it's so incredibly easy to be like, oh, I'm not going to be able to write good music until I buy this sample library, until I buy this sample library. So you end up just like sort of halting on writing music. Yeah, you end up either halting on writing music, or you continue to just sort of like write music, but you're never satisfied because you're always wanting more samples, and you have this constant urge. It's like it never ends with samples, because they're constantly releasing new sample libraries that are getting better than the last one, and you have better legato sampling.
No, the thing is that we're tricked into thinking that they're always better. I recently started going through my really old samples. Like, you find really, really cool stuff in the East-West Symphonic Orchestra that's like over 10 years old now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, why don't I use this? Why isn't this in my template,
Yeah.
And
definitely.
it's like, just buy something, stick to it, and learn the freaking hell out of how to use it.
Yeah, definitely
Learn how to mix it, learn how to use it, and you're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
Just don't become a sample library addict, because it's a very expensive addiction.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so on to the next little topic. Let me just make sure. Okay, gotcha. So next little topic we have is the process of scoring a film. So you want to take this one first, or do you?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, so I'm sort of split it up into a multi-step process. Are you sure? Are you sure?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I'm sort of split this up into a multi-step process, but we have so our initial meeting, so that's usually going to be between the composer and the director and or producer or producers, stuff like that. You'll have spotting sessions where you and the composer will look over the film.
Director.
You'll make you and the director. Yeah, we'll look over the film, decide when the music's going to be able to sort of stick its head out, or when it's going to really have to be low in the mix, and when it's going to have to support, or when it's going to have to be insanely rough. And really just support it, very, very strongly, like in a really intense battle sequence or something like that. Then you might have the thematic drafting / suite writing. I know somebody like Howard Shore is going to spend quite some time coming up with thematic material. Somebody like Christopher Young as well would just sort of walk around for weeks coming up with themes before he even gets to the scoring process. It's definitely what Howard Shore does. And in Howard Shore's case, he'll usually just have the book, and he'll read the book, and he'll sort of write down thematic sketches based off of the contents of the book. We also have suite writing. And suite writing is going to come down to pretty much writing a piece of music that is sort of a culmination of many different thematic ideas or many different ideas in general about the project. It sounds like I'm reading from something, but I'm not. But anyways, it's going to be that sort of just coming up with the initial ideas and laying out the groundwork before you even start going into the scoring process itself. After that, you're going to start the scoring process, and the scoring process is usually going to be in either a DAW, digital audio workstation, or it's going to be in a notation software such as Sibelius or Finale. It all really depends on your stylistic approach in general to composition. Most people are going to end up using DAWs because it's pretty simple to show the director what you're working on, and it's easy to then send to an orchestrator if the film has a budget to support that. Yeah, like that. And then you usually will go onto the orchestration stage. So if you compose like in a DAW, you'd send it to them. They'd make any final editorial changes and stuff like that. Or if you wrote in shorthand, like Howard Shore does a lot, the orchestrators would deal with that. One of the largest is Conrad Pope. And you also have the DAW to orchestration conversion process, which would be exporting stems, sending it to an orchestrator and having that orchestrated. Very expensive process, so in independent films, you usually won't end up having that. You usually just orchestrate stuff yourself, have it recorded. Then we'll have the copyist and preparation stage, where we will pretty much be dealing with final editorial changes, music preparation, and everything like that before we even get to the scoring stage at all. And so someone like Joanne Kane in Los Angeles is probably going to be one of the main ones when it comes to music preparation and music copyists and stuff like that. It's a very technical process of film composing. Following the music copyist and preparation stage, we're going to have the score recording. So this might take place in somewhere like Abbey Road Studio 1, Air Studios, East West Studios in LA, or there's scoring stages throughout the whole entire world that are used. And I know for Lord of the Rings, like the Desolation of Smaug, they use one in New Zealand as well. Wellington Hall, I believe, that's what it was, Wellington Hall, I think. But there's tons of them, and a lot of them sound great. So it all really depends on the budget of the film, depending on where you're recording it. Then you have post-production mixing, which someone like Alan Meyerson will deal with, where they'll pretty much mix the score. But then following that, you'll have the dubbing stage, where pretty much they'll take the final mixed version of the score and have that and pretty much they'll be like in a small movie theater environment, and they'll mix the score with the sound design and the Foley and everything like that. Following that, the final step is usually going to be the film's release. And usually on the film's release, you're going to have the score release. Other than if it's some weird exception like Hans Zimmer with Interstellar, where he actually released the score 2 weeks following the release of the film because he made the decision to want to have the music heard in a movie theater before people were listening to it on their headphones. And I always say, I always hate when people have one earphone in their ear. When mixing engineers mix stereo and people are just sort of walking around with one earphone in, and I totally understand from a standpoint of having the music heard in a movie theater, with a film first before listening to it on our iPhones, speakers, or on our computers or whatever like that. But that's usually the general scope of the film scoring process, and it's different depending on what it is you're talking about. But yeah, okay, so. Ajay, what's your experience with the process of film scoring?
It's of course what you explained is completely correct if you work in LA, or if you work in the States.
Yeah.
And maybe Germany, maybe France, maybe England, that have big film industries. If you work in Slovenia like me, or maybe in a different country, the film industry will, of course, in our country, a big budget for a film would be around 200,000 euros. That's big budget. But most films you get to work on are like short films. The whole budget would be
Yeah.
30,000 euros.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so of course, there's not a lot of these stages. There's not gonna be any room for these stages. So
Yeah. True.
maybe there's not gonna be any recording stage because you're gonna do everything in the DAW.
Mm-hmm.
But just one more thing I would like to point out. Let's say that one of our viewers now, a director comes up to him tomorrow and say, "Would you like to score a film? My film, and you need to do the music in the next 2 weeks."
Mm-hmm.
And he would just say, "Yes, I'm gonna do it," even if you're scared. But let's say you only own Sibelius at that time. You don't know Cubase. You don't know how to use a DAW. Just score the damn movie in Sibelius, and then maybe get a helping hand with someone else that knows a DAW. If you don't have time to learn, you don't have time to learn Cubase in 2 weeks. So whenever you get a project, what I'm saying is, when you get a project, own the tools like that you have at your disposal. Don't try learning something completely new when you get a project.
We have a question for you, Anze, and the question is from Darren, and it is, would you recommend the suite, like writing a suite, to be a linear match of the story?
That's a really good question. It really depends. I think that one way that you could write a suite is definitely be a linear version of the story. But maybe you could also write a suite of development of a certain character.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe the storyline would have a lot of characters. Let's say Maximus from Gladiator. He goes through an abundance of stages. You have the Maximus, the warrior. I mean, the general. You have Maximus, the family guy. You have Maximus, the slave. You have Maximus, the gladiator. You have Maximus, the savior.
So true. Yeah.
So maybe you can write a suite of Maximus, and then you can write a suite of someone else. So it really depends on what kind of film you're scoring, and what would benefit you as a composer with the suite, and how the suite would benefit the director. So if you would be scoring Gladiator 2, maybe it would be more beneficial for you to write a suite for Maximus, because then the director would see how Maximus would develop with the music.
Yeah. And I know that Hans Zimmer for the Pirates of the Caribbean Outworld's End wrote like this whole entire 10-minute suite just on the love theme between Orlando Bloom and Keira Knightley, I think it's called like the Marry Me suite or whatever. And it's just like 10 minutes of that love theme that he presents in that third film. And a lot of the times the suite usually end up being one of the essential aspects of the film score in the end, doesn't it?
Yeah, but I would like to also point out that most of the times you won't have time to write a suite.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have 1 week to score a film, don't spend your time writing a suite. Just go with it. If you have a month, maybe spend a day or two writing a suite. But if you have any less than a month, I wouldn't spend any time going to write a suite. I would just dive into it.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, definitely. Awesome. I think we had another question up here too. Let me just look. Let's see. It's a lot going on in the chat. I'm just trying to find it here. What conceptual practices do you use, Anze and Ashton? I mean, not just sketching your ideas / notation, etc. Conceptual practices. I'm not sure.
What is conceptual? I don't think I understand this word exactly.
Yeah, neither do I. I know what a concept is. Like
so
an
probably,
idea.
How do we start composing?
Yeah. Probably.
All right.
What it is.
Okay. I'll go first.
Sure. Yeah.
There are 4 ways that you can approach composition. One way is that you get this flow of inspiration and you just have to write it, and that's the best case scenario. Second best case scenario is that you'll get a melody stuck into your head, but you won't have the harmony or orchestration or whatever. Like in like real inspiration, I would have, you know, the whole piece written out in my head, or at least a section, you know. Maybe you have only a melody, so then write that melody down and then, you know, go with the chord progression or orchestration or whatever. And then, you know, maybe the third option is that you have nothing. Your mind is blank. You get a commercial to score in, you know, overnight, and then you switch on your, then you have to switch on your what's the word, your conscious mind and your knowledge. Then you really just write music with the knowledge you have. And I mean, most of the days you won't have any inspiration, you know. But for the process, like, I would say find a process that works for you. At least when I write orchestral music, I write everything vertically. So maybe I write a melody and then I orchestrate, you know, the whole section. I don't sketch out things. I don't make piano sketches usually.
Same here.
But when I teach my students, I teach them through the piano sketch process, because you know, even if I orchestrate everything as I go, you know, in the back of my mind, you know, all the gears are still turning, because I've written previously through piano sketches, so that knowledge, you know, comes out in a much faster pace. But I would just say again what I said, you know, an hour ago. If you get stuck at a certain bar, or you hate a certain note in your melody, you just think it doesn't work, leave it, you know, leave it and continue writing the music, and then get back to it when you actually, you know, have a decent amount of work done. Don't get stuck on a certain note and then, you know, go through the whole scale and try to find the perfect note, because there is no perfect note and there is no perfect chord and then there is no perfect melody. Just write music, because you'll have a lot more benefit from, you know, writing 2 minutes of music in one day than writing, you know, 4 bars because you made 40 versions of bar 2.
Definitely. All right, let's see here. Okay, so you wanted to talk a little about, because I want to hear your approach to this, the EU and film scoring and filmmaking. I believe that didn't you bring that up?
Yeah, I think so.
So what's your view? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, what's your view on the EU and film scoring and having to do with Brexit and everything like that? Go ahead.
I mean, a lot of points I've already made through this, you know, the whole talk we had now, but maybe it's I mean, many composers, like most film composers, I mean, or people that want to become film composers, they think of themselves scoring, you know, a Hollywood blockbuster. You know, the chances of you scoring a Hollywood blockbuster is pretty slim, but it's not impossible. So if your goal is, I want to score a Hollywood blockbuster, then the only chance really for you to do that is to go to LA. That's, you know, you're gonna, the most chances you're gonna get. But another way to get there, like for example, Alexander Desplat or Alberto Iglesias, who is a Spanish composer, and you know, they both work for Hollywood now, but they live in, you know, the country they were born at. Is that they first succeeded in the film industry in their country before being found out by LA. For example, Alexander Desplat, I think he scored over 50 films before his first Hollywood debut. You know,
in France,
So, for example, if I take myself, for example, you know, I love where I live. You know, I have a career in Slovenia. I might not be known outside Slovenia very much, but at least, you know, in my country, my name is kind of known. So that's why I'm getting projects, and that's why I can make a living off of music. If I would be in LA now, probably my life would be completely different. And I mean, I had big chances to go to LA and work there, but I just decided, you know, to kind of stay here in Slovenia. So my point is, I'm still young, you know, I can write music here. I can get new projects here, and maybe eventually, I'm gonna be able to score maybe a Slovenian feature film that's gonna be, a worldwide success, and that's gonna be some sort of, stepping stone for me.
Yeah.
Maybe work in LA.
I think
It's a slim
LA,
chance.
LA in general
Slim
just
chance.
sort of like brings you all the way down. Like for example, I live in Indiana, which is a state all the way to the west, and pretty much, I guess we live in this nice house now. But if we were to move our house to LA, our house would cost like $10 million. So it's
Yeah,
very yeah, it pretty much takes you all the way down. And just when you think you're a good composer where you are, or you're popular where you are, you move to LA, and now there's hundreds of other people that are just as good as you, and you're in this environment, and it's constant. Yeah.
When you're in LA, you can be top notch, but you're gonna
Yeah.
still be no one.
Yeah.
You're gonna be absolute no one. You're gonna be a little sand on a sandy beach.
Yeah.
I mean, mostly how composers start. You're gonna probably be an intern or assistant for another composer, and for at least 5, 6, or even more years, you're gonna try to gain their trust. I mean, and it's gonna take a long time before your name even shows up on a queue.
Yeah.
And here in Slovenia, I might not get Hollywood blockbusters to score, but at least I'm working on my own music, and I'm working on my own career, and I have no boss. I can do whatever I want, and it's a nice life. So if your real dream is to go to LA, then go, but expect that you're gonna have to leave everything at home behind.
Yeah.
And that's one of the main reasons I didn't go. It's because I just couldn't leave everything I have at home and that I enjoy about home behind.
Yeah.
But if you're not really attached to where you live and you have nothing holding you back, then go. You have nothing to lose. But if you want just to write music and make a living, then stay where you are. If you have at least a pretty decent network already created, and expand on that network, expand on your music, and then your music, your network will expand with the years, and with your knowledge, and with your music, and with your network.
Absolutely.
And it will just bring you somewhere. You don't know where it's gonna bring you. It's a joyful ride, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
Definitely.
And with the way the film music has sort of evolved, just here, I can hear myself in your thing.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. But anyways, the way for which film music has evolved is sort of a way where just 50 or 60 years ago, you would have needed to just be a really, really, really solid composer, and that would have gotten you jobs, and that really would have progressed you into the field. But nowadays, not only do you have to be a great composer, you now have to be a great politician. You have to get people on your sides. You have to always make smart decisions, make yourself look good. You always have to, really just be on point when it comes to networking, and when it comes to, it's such a political process nowadays when it comes to excelling in the industry. You're always, I hate to say it, you're always sucking up to people. You're constantly, trying to, it's this very, I don't know, it's this very heavy networking process in order to build your way up.
It's hard because most of composers, at least that I know, are introverts.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I'm pretty antisocial as well.
Yeah.
So like all these network things and going to meetings, and I mean I hate doing it.
Yeah, I love it.
But
I love
it. I mean, it's fun sometimes, but sometimes you just don't want to go to an event. You don't want to. But it's part of the job, and just the sooner you realize that it's part of the job, the better.
I'm the obnoxious kid at NAMM who just walks up to the people at Orchestral Tools and is like, I love you so much. Your libraries are so beautiful. You're beautiful. Everything about you is beautiful. Germany is beautiful. Give me a hug. Like I'm one of those people. But I definitely know. I definitely know a lot of other composers as well. I definitely by no means think you're like antisocial at all.
I mean, I'm not like the older I get, the more antisocial I get. Like I'm the happiest right here where I am right now, like in my studio. That's where I'm like the
Yeah.
happiest.
Yeah.
So it's really good that I have a teaching job at the Academy of Music, that I have to go out of my studio at least twice a week.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely.
uh,
Oh, sorry. You're saying something?
no, that's
Gotcha.
all.
Awesome. So, last little thing I just want to touch on, the future of film music. Things throughout history have continued to evolve. We went from the Renaissance to the Baroque. We went from Baroque to classical, classical to romantic, romantic to sort of modern contemporary atonal messes like, like Webern and stuff. And then we went to the golden age of film composition, and then we went to film music as we have today. So throughout history, things have evolved, and overall, different ideas have evolved. And so, what is your view on the direction of film music, where you think it's going to go, and how it's going to continue to evolve and stay fresh?
I think it's really hard to say. I think we're still in a, with with the death of James Horner last year or 2 years ago.
Yeah,
I can't
two,
remember. Was
two
it
years. Yeah,
I think
2 years.
2 years ago.
June,
It
I
was
think.
definitely the start of an end of an era.
Yeah.
Um, it's the same like with the death of Erich Wolfgang Korngold. He was like
Or Jerry Goldsmith. Yeah.
one of the beginners, and yeah, like the beginning of the golden era of Hollywood. But now you still have these composers that have been on the scene for years and years, like John Williams, of course, and Hans Zimmer. I mean, they're opposite poles, but still. But these, especially John Williams, he's getting extremely old, and when, I mean, he has just been 85.
Yeah. He's like,
This
yeah,
week.
he's in his high 80s, I believe, or mid 80s.
Yeah, I think he was 85 this year.
Gotcha. Yeah.
This week. But I mean,
He's
when
old
for
and he's
example,
still working.
yeah, he's still working. But for example, when he passes away, it's gonna definitely be an end of an era.
Yeah. Major
And
end
then
of an era.
the question is, who is going to be the next person that's going to put like a next milestone of how film music should sound.
Yeah.
I mean, Hans Zimmer is definitely one of these guys that has influenced, numerous millions of scores, and millions of people,
Yeah.
and everybody wants to write music like Hans Zimmer, and everybody wants to write music like John Williams. But who's going to be that next person that we're gonna say that everybody's gonna want to write music like him?
Yeah.
Like Michael Giacchino, I hope I pronounce his name right. I mean, he's a great composer, but I hear no one saying, I want to write music exactly like his.
Yeah.
Because still his music is, and I mean, I'm just saying, putting him as an example, but you could put, almost everyone that's not John Williams and it's not Hans Zimmer into a category. They write music more like John Williams, or they write music more like Hans Zimmer.
I just still don't understand why Thomas Bergerson isn't doing film music. As if so,
or Thomas Bergerson. I mean, he's incredible, and he has his own style as well.
He's just not interested at all in film music.
Or like Trent Reznor. You can put Trent Reznor in any box as well. Mm-hmm. His music is completely unique as well. So who's going to be this next character on the scene that everyone else is going to say, I wanna write music just like him.
Yeah.
Or her.
Absolutely.
Maybe her.
Yeah, maybe her. Yeah, I mean, we're always constantly evolving, and I think that Hans Zimmer recently said this in his masterclass. He said, I've been writing film scores for decades. I've worked with some of the greatest directors. I've made films that I'm so happy to have been a part of. But that time is coming where it's time to inspire a new age of composers and a new generation and people to take control from here. And as we continue to evolve and technology continues to evolve and the world continues to evolve and the whole functionality of this industry as a whole continues to evolve, so will film music. And I think that the story has just begun. Film has only been around for a little over 100 years, and we will continue to invent. And I think that it's composers' jobs to study the music of the past and learn from that and to evolve it and to keep alive this awesome art form. And I think that the more we put out videos like this, and the more we engage with people, and the more we let people know about the art of film music and the importance of it in film and everything like that, I think it just overall helps keep it alive. And I think that that's one of the most important things is, recently film music has been getting a lot of hype. Hans Zimmer just performed on the Stephen Colbert Show. I mean, this is Stephen Colbert. This is like a late night host in the United States that's very, very well known, like Jimmy Fallon. And this guy, Hans Zimmer, who's a film composer that we all admire in our industry, seeing him on stage there was one of the greatest things that I personally have ever seen. Just being able to sit there and, Academy Award winner Hans Zimmer, and then he performs this, piece from Planet Earth 2. It's this incredible thing, being able to see your industry continuously getting rise. And I think that as long as we have a world that's evolving, we're going to have a film industry and a film composition industry that is evolving. So I just want to take a second to thank you so much, Anze, for being a part of this thing today. I think we're going to have lots of awesome conversations ahead of us. And I just want to thank everyone that's been involved in this live stream and who's been commenting and sharing with us your ideas and everything. Thank you guys for joining us today. This video will be going up soon, and we're going to continue this series next week with some awesome trailer composers from Germany who own the company Edge of Silence. So we're going to be joined by Christian and Daniel Bejiboom, who pretty much composed the score for the trailer of War of the Planet of the Apes. So we'll be joined by trailer composers next week. So that'll be a definitely awesome thing as well.
They're awesome guys.
Yeah.
You're great friends, and I'll definitely join you guys next week.
Awesome. Yeah, sounds good. I mean, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you today. I learned an incredible amount just by listening to you talk, and I think that I love these conversational exchanges and everything like that. And
yeah, it was great. Thanks.
Yeah, and I look forward to talking with you soon. And we'll stay on just a couple minutes after this goes down. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you later. And I hope that you guys all have a good rest of your day. Bye.
Bye. See ya.